Okay. Well, sorry about that. So we are almost half an hour late, but I hope you don't mind, speakers. I hope you don't mind. So good evening, welcome. Welcome to the 9th session of the 4th Political Science and International Relations Congress organized by the Department of International Relations at the Karadeniz Technical University. So our session is titled Economical-Political Competition and the Quest for Strategic Equivalence in the International System. And we aim to have this session for like 1 hour and a half, 1 hour and a half, 1 hour plus 30 minutes. So the first 1 hour is going to be for the presentations, and the last half an hour is going to be for the discussion along with questions. So we have 6 presentations in these sessions, and we are going to follow the order in the program. So we are going to go with Sibel Zengin first, and then Gina Panagopoulou, Mayuri Banerjee, Mitrajit Biswas, Maula, Hudaya, Rizky, Maula, Hudaya, and Rizky, Anggia, Putri, sorry for my pronunciation, and lastly Hasan, Basri, Barut. Each presentation, each speaker is going to have like 10 minutes if possible, because we have 6 presentations, and please be very mindful of time. So for not interrupting you, I have like 2 notes. So when you are presenting, please keep an eye on me. So I'm going to show this in the last 3 minutes, and I'm going to show this in the last minute. So when you see this like 1 minute note, please finish up your presentations. Otherwise, I will have to interrupt you, and I don't want to do that. Okay, so that's all from me. And by the way, for the questions, if you have any questions, both speakers and the audience, please use the chat box. I will be checking that. And for the technical problems, we are going to use the chat box as well. So if we are ready, if Sibel Zengin, please start when you are ready. It's okay. Do we have Sibel Zengin? We don't have her, I think. Okay, shall we continue with you, Gina Panagopoulou?
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Greetings from Athens. First of all, my name is Gina Panagopoulou. Öncelikle bu mükemmel kongreye katılmama fırsat verdiğiniz için teşekkür ederim. Now I'll switch to English, of course. So there we are. Can you see the screen? Does it show? Okay,
yes, we do. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So our topic today is securitizing CRM, which stands for critical raw materials and space, and the repercussions this has on the US-Chinese bilateral relations. First of all, I'd like to introduce my structure, the structure of this presentation. I'll present you the research questions and the hypothesis, and then we will move on with the definitions and some key information on the critical raw materials. Then we will try to identify some key points of the securitization theory, which is our main theory used in this paper. And then, as this theory requires, we will investigate, let's say, we'll look into the speech acts concerning CRM and space. By the way, by space, I mean outer space. Speech acts made both by Washington and Beijing. Then we will try to look into the reasons for their behavior. And in the end, we will check the impact on their bilateral relations before we move to our conclusions. So the research questions that are the reason behind this research is, does the US space industry depend on China as far as CRM is concerned? Have both China and the US securitized rare critical materials and space? What are their behavior concerning these activities? What are the reasons behind this behavior? And how this situation has affected the bilateral relations. The hypothesis I have tried to form here is that if you securitize one of the components of something, then this something becomes securitized as a whole too. Why this hypothesis? Because for the space industry to work, to function without any interruption, you need these critical raw materials that we're going to talk about. So I think that they are highly interconnected. So as far as critical materials are concerned, these are materials, usually metals, that are important to an economy, to the military of a state, to the defense industry of a state, and their supply chains are highly vulnerable to disruption. So there's a high risk behind it. As far as security is concerned, we will use the definition that goes along with the securitization theory. And as Buzan, Weaver, and Wild say in their book, Security: A New Framework of Analysis, at best, security is a kind of stabilization of conflictual or threatening relations, often through emergency mobilization of the state. To explain it a bit, security is mainly a feeling, not only by people, but also by states, which makes them behave in a certain way in order to protect themselves. So if they have a lack of security, they feel threatened. And this is why I have not provided any definition for threat, because I believe that threat is something different to each actor and each subject. But it contains, of course, the feeling of insecurity. So about the CRM, the key point to make here is that China dominates their supply chain, and it's got 45% share in this market, which makes all the other states dependent on it, with all the implications this has. As far as the theory is concerned, securitization, as already said, Barry Buzan, Oli Weaver, and Yapti Wild introduced it in 1998 with their book. Securitization, as its name says, is a procedure, and is a procedure when a topic becomes politicized. It was non-politicized, it becomes politicized, so it's discussed in the public sphere, and then it becomes securitized when a securitizing move takes place. But what's this? This is a presentation of a topic as an existential threat, which means that it is a threat, it is something that against which we need to take urgent, immediate action, or else we won't be there to combat it. And when is the securitization successful? When the public accepts this rhetoric that the referent object is an existential threat. So, has the US securitized CRM? Let's take a look at the speech acts. Just some examples here. The US Department of Energy has produced a report. In this report, one can read that these are elements essential to the economic prosperity of the country and of its national defense. And also that there is dependency of the nation in them, and there is strategic vulnerability for both the economy and military. By the way, the US is 100% net importer. So this means it's highly vulnerable to any interruption in the supply chain of these materials. There are also some executive orders issued by US presidents, Trump and Joe Biden, as you can see here. And there is also the US Innovation and Competition Act passed last June in 2021, so a few months ago. And all this have as their center the protection of the US against any possible interruption of the critical raw material supply chains. So yes, the US has highly securitized this topic. What about Beijing? Well, Beijing has been witness to weaponize critical raw materials such as rare earths back in 2010 when we had the rare earth crisis. Another example is when in 2019 there was a statement in public in the formal Communist Party newspaper, and they said, "Don't say we didn't warn you." They said this against the US in order to remind them they are dependent on their supplies of critical raw materials. Another example is this year when they threatened to cut supplies to the American company Lockheed Martin, which was a retaliation for the US sale of Patriot missiles to Taiwan. And all this brings to our mind the Deng Xiaoping expression back in 1992, when he said that the Middle East has oil, but China has rare earths. And I would say not only rare earths, critical raw materials in general. Quick slide here. Rare earths are some metals with funny names, let's say. And here we've got, thank you, we've got the share of China's production, which is 95%, and it's still the same nowadays. What about space? Both have securitized space. We can see this in the US National Space Policy, which aims to strengthen the security of outer space activities and space industry. We can also see this in the Beijing's official documents, where it says that it is among China's national defense aims. So the reasons behind their behavior are, of course, security dilemmas, national interests that have to be served, and which serve their survival in the international system. All this stems from their feeling of being threatened and from their power struggle for the hegemonic position. On the one hand, US efforts are, along with maintaining its position or to limit its losses, and China's efforts are to establish itself as best as possible as a hegemon. So the impact on their bilateral relations is, of course, a great power antagonism, mutual suspicion, a technology race, economic and trade war, I would say. Finally, to conclude, we can sum up by saying that China's dominance on CRM is undebatable. CRM supply chains are vulnerable indeed, and US is greatly reliant on China. Both states have securitized both sectors, CRM and space industry. And it's their interest, national interest and survival that drives them. And it's this goal that they try to serve. So in order to serve their survival, to maintain it, states can do whatever it takes. Finally, I would say that the research hypothesis has been validated, at least in this case. Of course, it would be rather beneficial if we examined more cases in order to see if this can be generalized. So thank you very much for your attention. Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you, Gina. It was amazing time management. So we have Sibel Zengin now. So Sibel Zengin, please start when you are ready.
Yes, hello. I'll just share. Is there any problem? Is it okay? My screen?
Yep.
Do you see? Yeah.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay. My presentation is about Cyprus question in the Eastern Mediterranean, the deadlock between Turkey and the EU. First of all, I'd like to give a brief background information on the Cyprus problem in order to describe the impact on the issue on Turkey-EU relations. After 3 centuries of Ottoman reign and subsequent 8 decades of British colonial rule on the island, the bi-communal Cyprus Republic was established in 1960, where power would be shared by Greek and Turkish communities on the island, living side by side. When the civil war erupted on the island in 1963, the existing equilibrium was completely upset, evolving into a radicalization of the Greek and Turkish identities. In 1974, Turkey's military intervention against the Greek coup which aimed at uniting the island with Greece, known as Enosis, reversed the situation completely, leading to de facto division on the island. Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was established in 1983 unilaterally, although this resulted in decades of non-recognition and isolation by the international community towards the northern third of the island. The UN-mediated Annan Plan referendum, which was an historic opportunity for resolution, failed in 2004, whereas the same year, Greek Cypriots who refused the plan were still able to join the EU as the sole representative of the whole island. All of this has visibly changed Turkey's relations with the Union in an irreversible way, even brought about a pause in the process of accession negotiations. After the rejection of the United Nations Annan Plan by the Greek Cypriots in 2004, UN-sponsored peace talks between 2015 and 2017 that were relaunched for reunification also failed. Whereas the EU's struggle with its own economic, political, and institutional problems over the past decade in particular have resulted in a loss in its interest to bring about a Cyprus settlement, the changing regional and international context has triggered a new agenda for the immediate solution of the problem. Yet Turkish Cypriots two-state indication in Geneva this year in 2021 ended also with no common ground due to the fragile balance between Turkey and Greece, rooted in long-lasting entanglements and serious disagreements. The Cyprus dispute has been intensively on the agenda of Turkey's European Union bid after 1990, the year that the Greek Cypriot administration made an application for accession to the EU. Certainly, the Cyprus problem has been in long-running deadlock as a result of the power struggle between the Turkish and Greek communities on the island, as well as between Turkey and Greece as the guarantor states. Ever since the Union embroiled in the long-standing impasse on the island, the Cyprus dispute brought about a new drastic slowdown, even a pause in the process of Turkey's EU perspective, after all of the efforts that have been made so far. Huge natural gas discoveries, mainly after 2010, has raised various geopolitical challenges for the EU and both sides in the Cyprus conflict. The unique geostrategic significance of the island has further complicated the same old dilemma. A resource-poor Europe now regards the entire area as a perfect zone for its ever-increasing hunger for energy. The EU has built its maritime claims in the Eastern Mediterranean with reference to the membership perspective. The EU defines the waters that surround the whole island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, along with the Greek waters in the agency, as its external maritime boundaries. However, these waters overlap with the areas claimed also by Ankara, with an aim to protect its interests and rights of Turkey and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. Since late 2019, the region was rocked by fierce competition and escalating turbulence. Grounded on the blue homeland, naval doctrine, seismic exploration and drilling activities of Turkey in the waters where Greece and Greek Cypriot administration claimed jurisdiction over, were found provocative by the EU and triggered potential heavy sanctions. Nevertheless, these sanctions were never realized. The dispute, as my conclusion, the Cyprus dispute can be considered as one of the main factors that makes Turkey's accession more problematic, and yet a solution to the problem is beneficial for the own good of all the relating parties. From the 2000s onward, the EU's asymmetrical involvement in the conflict gave rise to present circumstances, as the EU has accepted the island of Cyprus in 2004 as if there were no border disputes. In fact, the EU handicapped a possible solution on the Cyprus dispute by admitting the southern administration of the island as the sole representative of the whole Cyprus. The EU's hidden motivation, behind its assertive behavior in the energy conflict has therefore materialized in the status of Greece and Greek Cyprus as full EU members. Cyprus issue is actually not unlikely to drop out as an obstacle to Turkey's EU membership process, coupled with the Eastern Mediterranean crisis. After this year talks, Turkish Cypriots, two separate state indication, not reunification, is actually one of the potentials for becoming the new metrics on the conflict in the long run. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. And we can continue with Mayuri Banerjee. Do we have Mayuri Banerjee? I cannot see. I think we don't have this person. So we can jump to Mitrajit Biswas. Do we have Mitrajit Biswas? Yeah, we have. Hi. Merhaba.
Very much warm welcome from my side from India, and it's a pleasure to meet everyone out here and to listen to wonderful presentations. I will not take much time. Shall I move to the presentation?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Sure. I hope my screen is visible.
No, I can't see it actually. Did you share it?
Yeah, I did. Well, I think I'm.
Yes. Now I see a very black screen though.
Well, it's showing from my end that my screen is being shared.
Yep. Okay. It is done now. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. As my presentation title goes, it's on the implications of power struggle between China and India and Asia and its global fallout. Well, it's quite a mouthful of a presentation title, but I have already seen the esteemed presenters who presented before me who have actually referred to much of scholarly work. So I'm not using much of scholarly work here, but it's more of an understanding and I've mentioned some of it in the abstract. So I'm just going to go through the presentation slides of what the topic and the presentation is all about. Well, I mean, I've also used a lot of reference to COVID-19 because definitely it's a changing scenario for the entire world. And coming from India, I mean, we have faced the brunt of the second wave quite badly, which was quite, unfortunate for us. So the COVID-19 crisis actually came in the time of, actually we were moving into a time of globalization, moving into deglobalization. That's what many experts used to believe because populist leaders like Donald Trump and Shinzo Abe, and of course, even our own prime minister who are known as populist leaders, and not to forget even the president of Turkey, who are all considered to be very populist leaders. They're all looking at a society or building a country which is not really related to moving or expanding outward. It was more moving towards the inward side of their own selves. But my main agenda for the topic was that how this deglobalization has actually been moving much faster or has accelerated because of COVID-19 and how it has changed the dynamics of geopolitics between India and China and Asia. So I'm going to move ahead. Well, I mean, if you look at Asia in specific, Asia has had, if you look at Asia, there has been a bedrock of old civilizations, of course, which includes the Indus, Mesopotamian, Sumerian, Chinese. The Egyptian would not fall under Asia, it would come under the Arab or the North African world. But in Asia, it has always been the civilizational progress has moved mostly from here. Of course, we can consider Europe, where I have my esteemed colleague from Greece, because Greek civilization, the Romans, they are also one of the greatest old civilizations, but I have not specifically moved looking into Europe. I'm looking into Asia. So that's why I've mentioned mostly the Asian ones. This understanding of civilization is important for the conflict between India and China is because these are two nations who have been formed after the colonial period. I mean, they are mostly the outcome of the colonization, though the colonization history of China and India is quite different in some aspect, though both have been controlled by the British. India has been directly controlled, where the Chinese have been controlled mostly in terms of the taxations. So this cultural sphere and this idea of civilizational progress is very important when we look at India and China's conflict, because both see themselves as the outcome of old and great civilizational history. And that's why the conflict has always been mostly there. If you look at cooperation in Asia before COVID-19, it's quite difficult to really understand the cooperation aspect, because Asia doesn't have a universal body like European Union, which is there in Europe. European Union, of course, has some members who are not there, part of Europe, mostly the Balkan parts who are not part of EU, but still it considerably covers a large part of Europe. Whereas in Asia, it's not a single organization. We have ASEAN, we have SAARC, which is nearly defunct. Then there is, of course, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which of course includes Russia, which is a transcontinental country, much like Turkey. So there was definitely a lot of ideas which were there for Asia, but the whole idea of cooperation and moving together was never really there. And therein comes China as one of the most important countries, because China's vision, I've used the word realpolitik, which of course refers to the idea of assertive politics and trying to get the the profitable value from use of politics, be it through the application of hard power or be it through the application of soft power. So China is probably one country which has actually had a vision to increase their footprint across Asia. And that of course includes the Belt and Road Initiative, though it has gone into some sort of trouble and it has not really picked up in pace what China has expected. But they were one of the only countries in Asia that has had a vision of engulfing all the other members within the huge Asian continent. Now, if I look at the Asian drama coming and continuing from the last slide, Southeast and South Asia are two parts of Asia which have huge populations, and they are quite politically important as well. Southeast Asia, of course, includes the ASEAN grouping, which has 10 member countries. And South Asia is where, India comes in, and from where I belong. And that's where the bedrock of real competition and so-called conflict between India and China comes in, because we must remember that India, China, and Pakistan is probably the world's most dangerous nuclear triad anywhere in the world. I mean, 3 nuclear powers residing side by side, and that's not a really comfortable relationship. That's quite uncomfortable. It's not like France and Germany of EU today, who have forgotten their past and is actually moving ahead and has done quite well for European Union. So that's where one of the most important areas is related to China and India conflict, and its global fallout in terms of huge repercussions have not been there, except there has been border wars, and certain areas of South China Sea can be considered a conflict point between China and India, though United States of America is directly involved. And China has recently passed a ship ownership law, which includes taking in Chinese pilots for so-called maneuvering through the waters claimed by China. So that can be a possible irritant for India and China relations, and already a grouping called Quad is there. But I'm not going to go into that detail as of now, because I'm not going to digress from this present conflict of Asia itself. Of course, South China Sea is an important area to be covered when we talk about India and Chinese conflict. But here in this slide, what I tried to mention was that there is a lot of factors of China and India conflict, and that's not related to just hard politics, because Chinese are notoriously known for providing debt, loans in the form of, in assistance, which actually becomes a debt trap for many countries. Classical examples would be Sri Lanka, which has actually suffered because of loans which have been provided by China and which they could not repay. Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines, these 4 are actually economically strong and developing countries, much like India and China. But Philippines have had a quite rough relationship with China when it comes to Spratly and Paracel Islands in South China Sea. The same goes for Vietnam, which shares an uncomfortable relationship with China despite their ethnic origins coming from China and Chinese, cultural influence is very strong there. Indonesia is an important country, but there have been some problems with China itself. Now, where comes the role of India? That's because Vietnam and India are now trying to build up a strong military alliance, which includes buying of BrahMos missiles by Vietnam. BrahMos is a cruise missile which has been jointly developed by India and Russia and considered one of the world's best. Philippines and India have not had really a strong and strategic military relationship, though the President Rodrigo Duterte had visited India some years back, but there are strong relationship building in process, though it will take some time. India and Indonesia, on the other hand, share a good strategic relationship, and India and Thailand, it's mostly economic. Now, these factors are important to consider because if you look at Chinese relationship, then these countries are mostly very important for China to get a hold on the South China Sea itself. I'm going to go ahead and rush a bit. I have already talked about India, Japan, US and Australia while I mentioned Quad. South Korea could be a possibly interesting factor coming in if I look at the equation of India-China conflict. And Chinese have also been actually mostly provoking India with certain provocative developmental projects which are, contested because of the boundary issues and the land issues, which one of the classic example would be Myanmar, which India is not comfortable with because it shares border with the northeastern part of India. And there are huge security threats there. The role of India has been mostly to have a diplomatic relationship with most of the countries, and that also includes providing for defense and security arrangements, as I've mentioned in the example that there have been certain backhanded support from China for certain separatist groups of Northeast India who fled, to Myanmar, and Chinese backing is there strongly in Myanmar government. Of course, Myanmar has been going through a lot of trouble with their own military takeover. So basically, it's like a triangular love story, which I mentioned. The word love is mostly used as a sarcastic sense because Pakistan and India's relationship is probably notoriously well known across the world. After 70 years, and now we are moving to 75 years, we've still not been able to move beyond the issues of Kashmir, and many other issues are there. It's mostly like probably Greece and Turkey, but they have moved ahead. And the quest for new Asian axis and power, it's keeping on coming. And I've also mentioned about the conflict was in the Galwan. So I'm going to move ahead because my host has already said that I'm running short on time. And the South Asian dynamics, which I mentioned, there are many countries which are small in size, but they are being surrounded by China with a lot of money. And it's called the string of pearls. It's a very interesting theory of surrounding India all across by providing support to the neighboring countries who do not share a good relation with India. And that's where the most important role would be to for the outreach of India. And India has taken some steps like Chabahar port making in Iran to counter the string of pearls. And as I mentioned, very first slide, that the whole idea of civilization and the re-emergence of these two countries is the main factor, which has reached a point which is quite tricky. So I'm now going to rush ahead with my slides. There are other players as well.
Okay, so are you done?
Yes, I'm done.
Right, okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Right, so we have now the paper by Maula, Hudaya and Rizky, Anggia, Putri. Do we have one speaker or two speakers in this paper, in this presentation?
Yes, we're here.
No, are you both gonna speak, or just one of you is gonna speak?
I want to divide the presentation, so both of us will speak.
First, you are gonna go, and then your friend is gonna go, right? Right? Okay, so we have so one of the speakers was absent, so you both can go like 10 minutes each.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna wait for my partners to present. Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Greeting from Indonesia. Here, my name is Putri and my partner Maula Hudaya. We're going to present our research paper with the title, The Rising of China as a Global Maritime Power, a Challenge to the United States Mahanian Doctrine. So this is the table of contents of our presentations. Start with research background and continue with research question. And next, conceptual framework, the argument, analysis, and the last is conclusion. Next, please. So the research question, sorry, back please, Maula. No, I mean the research background, please. Okay, thank you. So the research background of this research actually start from several points that I have stated here. So the rise of China's power as a major economic power in the 21st century poses its own threat to the United States' undisputed hegemony status that has lasted since the collapse of the Cold War. And the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken even openly called China the biggest geopolitical challenge for the United States. Even Blinken not only saw the rise of China as an economic threat, but he also stated that among several countries categorized as a threat to the United States, only China was considered economically, diplomatically, and militarily and technologically capable of posing a serious threat to the system and international, also national interests of the United States, both at home and abroad. Antony Blinken's statement is not without reason. China's growth as a great power is indeed accompanied by geopolitical consequences, which in some ways are contrary to the geopolitical order decided by the United States. At first, the growth of China's power started from the rapid economic growth since 1978 as a result of the economic reform policy of the president of Deng Xiaoping, who decided to open China's economy to foreign investment. And this policy actually boosted China's economy rapidly, where the initial closed country turned into a world manufacturing center and became a strategic trading partner for hundreds of countries in the world. So this condition strengthens China's position as the world's largest economic power by ranking first as the largest exporter country with a value of more than 2,000 trillion US dollars in 2016, as well as the largest importer with a value of more than 1,000 trillion US dollars in 2016. And China's status as one of the world's largest economic powers, which has become a strategic trading partner for hundreds of countries in the world, has also increased China's soft power to influence other countries so as to create changes in the global economic order. Next, please. So the research question of this research is, why is the rise of China maritime power is considered as serious geopolitical challenge for the United States? Next, please. On this research, we're going to use the conceptual framework of Mahanian power with the main goal, the command of the sea. And there are several arguments that being the main argument of this theory, which first is a country must obtain undisputed control on strategic waters to exercise command of the sea. And the second is there are no other naval power of any rival countries allowed to operate in same strategic waters. The third, command of the sea are contested through decisive battle, and the famous sentences is whoever conquers the sea, conquer the world. Next. Our argument on this research is the US perceived the rise of China as a serious geopolitical challenge and responded aggressively because the US adheres to the Mahanian sea power doctrine and its naval strategy and in all foreign policies related to maritime affairs. So the US as status quo maritime power sees the rise of China as a serious threat to its current command of the sea. Next. The analysis will be presented by Maula.
Thank you, Anggia. Here is the analysis. Maritime geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific region, which was originally dominated by the United States' undeniable command of the sea, as evidenced by the large number of naval bases and naval fleets present in the region. This evidence will be explained in the next slides, by the way. Underwent significant changes in geopolitical dynamics along with the rapid rise of China's maritime power. By stating maritime power, it doesn't necessarily mean that naval power alone, but maritime power as a whole, including maritime economy. After the economic reform of China in 1978, China has grown rapidly as one of the largest global economic power and achieved titles of both world's largest exporter and importer country. That means China is the main trade partner to hundreds of countries across the globe. It also means that China's maritime trade route has also grown rapidly, and automatically, according to the sea power theory, the strategic maritime trade route and commercial fleet operating in the route cannot be living alone without a proper naval power to guard it. Because according to the theory, maritime trade route is vital to country's economy, so it has to be properly guarded. This factor, alongside with the historical one, of course, explain the rapid rise of China's naval power nowadays. The problem is, this phenomenon alarmed the US, who previously held the command of the sea status in the Indo-Pacific region, the same region where the Chinese Navy mainly operates. The rise of Chinese naval power was apparently strong enough to make the US fears that its status as the current command of the sea would be disrupted by the rise of China's naval power. Even the US Congressional Research Service stated that the size of Chinese Navy has grown so rapidly that their fleets are almost equal in size with the United States naval fleet. This has provoked a relatively aggressive response from the US. According to Mahanian Doctrine, the command of the sea itself is absolute, so that now two forces that are almost equally strong can operate in the same area, especially with the status of rival countries. This explains the aggressive response of the United States to the rise of China's maritime power and its maritime strategy. This also has the potential to trigger large-scale conflict, considering that, in Mahan's view, the only way to obtain or maintain command of the sea is through a decisive naval battle. This part will be explained by Anggia.
So there are several data that we were obtained, and we're going to use as the supportive data for our research. The first is the US maritime presence in Indo-Pacific. So as you can see on the screen, we have provided several data about the US presence in Indo-Pacific. There are several camps and joint naval base on several countries. And then next. There are also military installations in Indo-Pacific as well, which are in Singapore, Republic of Korea, until Japan. Next. And this map shows how the US maintained a large naval presence and permanent bases with more than 90,000 ground forces in Japan, South Korea, and Guam. Next. So the Indo-Pacific strategic value for the US, there are a lot actually, but we already highlight some of it. So like the Indo-Pacific value itself, as we can see on the screen, as the 7 of the top 15 US manufactured export destination in Asia are in Asia, which start from China to Australia, and then the 8 of the top 15 US agricultural export destination also in Asia, from Japan to Thailand. Next. And the 5 US treaty allies are in Indo-Pacific as well, start from Australia to Thailand, which deployed over 74,000 troops. And in 2017, 4 Indo-Pacific economies were among in the top 10 US trading partners, especially China. And next, Indo-Pacific is a home to the United States' closest competitor in economic size and military strength, which is China as well. And then the last is Indo-Pacific nations, including US allies and partners involved in major territorial disputes with China, especially in the South China Sea and East China Sea. Next.
Thank you, Anggia. This part is here is the comparison between China and the U.S. naval fleet size, according to the Congressional Research Service from the United States of America. From the data, we can see that the Chinese fleet are slowly catching up and finally overtake the U.S. Next. And what is the consequences of this condition? The growth of China's maritime power, which is accompanied by a series of strategies by China, both economic and military, such as Belt and Road Initiative, or we known as the BRI, has also changed the pattern of relations between countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Investments in the connectivity sector, especially maritime connectivity, have brought countries in the region closer to China. This makes the United States worried that countries that were originally inside in its sphere of influence are turning closer to China. In addition, there are also concerns that the country that was originally close to China is becoming more closer and closer, and become a serious threat toward the interests of the United States and its allies in the Indo-Pacific regions. The most visible examples of this is in the case of Pakistan. In my previous research in 2018, Pakistan and China are cooperated in the construction of the Gwadar port through the BRI scheme. At that time, rumors circulated that had not been the rumor have not even proven to be true, but were believed by various parties, especially those who are against China and Pakistan, that the Gwadar port will be function as a Chinese naval base. This sparked a strong reaction from India, which felt besieged if it's really happened. So that India also increased the development of its naval power. So the tension in the region become hotter and hotter because of this issue. And then next, and then what is the response of the United States? According to the situation, it is the U.S. response to China's rising maritime power. Firstly, U.S. under the Donald Trump administration established the Open Indo-Pacific strategy in 2017 to contain the BRI initiative by China. The aim is to reclaim its sphere of influence in the region through the economic means. Secondly, the U.S. also rebuilt the quadrilateral security dialogue, or well known as the Quad. And then through the Quad, the United States and its allies are routinely carry out naval exercise near Chinese territory in the Eastern Indian Ocean region, and even involve French Navy as exercise partner. And then the last but not least, two Secretary of the States in the different era, Mike Pompeo from the Donald Trump's era and Antony Blinken from Joe Biden's administration, both sees China as a serious threat to the United States. Pompeo conducting anti-China campaign during his visits in some of Indo-Pacific countries, especially in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia and Vietnam, while Blinken in his speech clearly stated that China is the greatest geopolitical challenge to the US, as Anggia stated before. And then the rapid development of China's maritime power, both in terms of military and economy, has created significant changes in geopolitical and geoeconomic order in the region. Countries that were originally in the US sphere of influence have become closer to China, so automatically the strategic waters surrounding these countries have also begun to be dragged into China's sphere of influence. This changed the maritime geopolitical order, which was originally part of the US Command of the Sea, then turned into the absolute, not absolute anymore, Or in the sea power theory, we can call it working control, where a rival navy can operate in the region with very limited access, or even have potential to turn into control in dispute, where the presence of China as relatively equal power, so it is able to challenge the US power in the region. Until this time, the US is still using aggressive but still relatively soft ways to stem China's influence. However, in Mahanian sea power approach, command of the sea can only be contested through decisive battle. So the current condition have the potential to go in that direction. The US response that formed the Quad and routinely held military exercises around Chinese borders could be a strong sign that the US is indeed preparing itself for the decisive battle in the future. So the conclusion is the United States considers the rise of China's maritime power as a threat because it used the command of the sea doctrine by Alfred Ayer Mahan in its maritime doctrine. Therefore, the rise of China, which has the potential to challenge the United States command of the sea, is considered as a serious threat. Although, until this time, there has been no attempt to do a decisive battle by the United States. The tendency is still towards it in accordance with the concept of command of the sea. Greetings from Indonesia. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have our last presentation of the session. So Hasan, Basri, Barut.
Yes, I'm here.
Ready. Right, okay. You can stop whenever you're.
I am sharing. You can see, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, but so yeah, okay. I can start, I think. Okay. My name is Hasan Basri. I am a MA student at Kadras University and research assistant at Işık University. And today I will talk about the Russia-China relations, and our main research question will be, is hedging the case between Russia and China, or in other words, does Russia aims to hedge against China? This is our research question. You can see my content, but due to time constraints, I just skip it. I'm so sorry. Okay, I would like to first briefly mention the rise of China concept. As we all know, after 1990s, the Chinese economy started to flourish due to several openings or economic reforms. And as you can see on the right graph, it's almost catch up with the US economy. And in the graph on the left side of my PowerPoint, as you can see, after 1990s, the trade volume of China has increased, like the exports and imports, and it shows that in terms of commerce, Chinese marks on the world economy is increasing. And according to the last projections, 2028 will be the year Chinese economy suppressed the US economy, and because it was inevitable at the end of the day, everybody was expecting this. However, when the authors focus on the rise of the China concept, they are generally focusing on the perspective of the Western powers, the European Union or United States. But the other powers, especially I will focus on Russia, is kind of understudied. There are studies, but it is kind of understudied, and I will focus on this. And briefly, I will touch upon the Sino-Russian relations. As we all know, during the Cold War period, because of the ideological frictions, the Stalinization under Khrushchev especially is important event, and the border disputes along the Ussuri River created a tension between these ideological affiliated states. And until the Gorbachev era, the relations were tense. However, under Gorbachev, the introduction of glasnost and perestroika changed the picture, and the forces withdrew from the borders, and the detente has started. And when the Russian Federation was established in 1991, this positive picture continued. And the Treaty of Friendly Relation was signed between these two countries in 1992. And when we move to the 2000s, we see a deepening in relations between these two countries. In 2001, Treaty for Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation was signed, and in 2007, joint declaration was made to build mutual trust and cooperation. And then in 2010, after the 2008 economic recession in 2014, the annexation of Crimea, the comprehensive strategic and cooperative partnership reinforced by several projects, projects including fishing and military equipment, energy, especially energy. However, there is a major disparity between these two. The first one, as you can see from this chart, these two graphs, 50% of the Russian trade is dependent on China. However, only 0.8% of Chinese economy dependent on Russia. It is problematic. There is a huge imbalance. And I will focus on hedging. Hedging is a new concept in IR. Unfortunately, there is no agreed definition as like many other terms, like for instance, balancing and bandwagoning. We should focus on balancing and bandwagoning, but I won't touch upon. Most of us are IR students or IR professors. The first use of this term, hedging, like used by Roy and Go, these two are English scholars, British scholars, in 2005, and they are generally saying that keeping open more than strategic option against the possibility of a future threat. It is like creating options because being over-dependent or being a challenger state can demolish you one day or destroy you one day. It is regarding this. And then US national security strategy used this term, hedging against China, in 2006, and it was for the first time US security used this term. And then Quick in 2008, in his article, remarked that countries seeks to offset risks by pursuing multiple policy options that are intended to produce mutually counter-effecting effects under the situation of high uncertainties or high stakes. Again, there are uncertainty and high stakes. Like uncertainty is the key, as we can see. When we move on to the other conceptualization, in 2016, Korolev brought a novelty, and he remarked that it is a regional phenomena, and only in regional politics you can pursue this, and it is a mixture of balancing and bandwagoning. And then Vishnik also made the same conceptualization, engagement and balancing, it is a mixture of. And then in 2018, when we look at the Kogas article, he said that it is again mixture of balancing and bandwagoning, but the cause of this policy is deciding a neutral policy, like whether you will be neutral or you will decide your own policy. And in 2001, Dikarev and Lukin, Russian scholars, remarked that it's a point, a spectrum, in a spectrum, on the one hand balancing and on the one hand bandwagoning, and diversification due to the fear of dependence. And in the light of this conceptualization, I made my own conceptualization. Hedging means aiming to align with the powerful state, in our case, China, while developing ties with other nations to lessen the dependence for the future and minimize the possible security risk. It is my conceptualization. And then we can focus on my first case. My first case will be the South China Sea conflict, which is so popular. And according to this conflict, it is China versus China against all, like Vietnam, Brunei, Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, these 5 countries and China. And the Chinese claim based on the historical territories discourse, and it started in 1950s. And when we move on to 1990s, because until 1990s, by the way, China used several policy tools to demand territory or exclusive economic zones in this area. However, in the 1990s, the whole picture changed suddenly because major energy sources, oil and natural gas, was discovered in the region, and it increased the appetite of China because its need for energy was rising. And in 2009, Philippines, Vietnam, and Malaysia reported China to the UN, and China, as we can see from this map, 9-dash line, they claimed all of this area for itself. Again, on the ground that they are the historical territories of China. And there are three important issues. The first one is the artificial island building to make Chinese claims less doubtful, let's say. And then military maneuvers by China and sometimes with other countries like Russia in 2016. And then the US involvement to make sure that the free navigation of the trade and the ships. However, there is this problem. Russia is impartial, and as I mentioned, Russia-China relations are quite good, but Russia is impartial, and Russia has good ties with other countries, especially Vietnam. I will focus on Vietnam in my presentation, and because of the time concern again. As I mentioned, in Cold War period, Russia-Vietnam relations were good, and then in 2000 again, we see this upward trend in the relations, and there is a submarine military procurements, missiles, oil drills, and fishing sectors. There are lots of investments in these areas, also energy. And why Russia do this? The first, I claim that Russia doesn't hedge against China by cooperating with Vietnam because Russia aims to create new markets for its Kremlin-backed Russian companies, for instance, Rosneft, and the development of the Far East, Russian Far East, which is the sparsely populated area, and then the relatively backward region. And then Russia wanted to focus on the historical policies and then the geographically distant historical policies with India and other countries. And then the geographically distant area means the social South China Sea is not the priority for Russia for now, but it can change in the future. When we look at my second case, the Ladakh crisis in 2020, as we all know, Russia and China has problematic relations along this border, Russia-India-China border. And in 2020, there was one crisis in Galvan Valley. It is here, you can see, and it was the most brutal clash between these two countries in last 45 years. This created a problem because there were 20 soldiers died in the side of India, and then there were 4 deaths on the side of China. Firstly, the US offered a mediation by Donald Trump. However, it was declined. And then Russia played a off-the-record mediation by taking advantage of Russian presidency in BRICS and then Shanghai Cooperation Organizations. Also in June, Russia brought these sides around the table by using Russia, India, China trilateral meetings. The defense minister of these two countries, India and China, come and they met. And then in Shanghai Cooperation meeting in September, first the defense minister of these two countries, India and China, and then the foreign ministers of these two countries again met, and then they made remarks about the mitigating this dispute and then solving this problem. Why Russia again played this role? There are 3 reasons. The first 2 are so interlinked. The first one is that Greater Eurasia Doctrine, or we can say it was developed by a think tank, Valdez Club, and according to this, Russia, China, and India are a main axis, and they will help Russia to reach the status it seeks, and then also to challenge the US-led liberal hegemony. And the other one is again related to military procurement with India, because as we all know, India aims to buy lots of missiles, S-400s, for instance, in Turkey it is so famous, and then also helicopters and jets. And Russia doesn't want to lose this very lucrative partner in terms of military. In conclusion, there is no hedging between these two countries. Russia just prioritized its own economy and try to compensate the loss created by the firstly 2008 economic crisis and then the 2014 annexation of Crimea and the following embargo. That's why in the short term there is no hedging, but in the long run everything can change because the picture is not so stable. Thank you for listening. Sorry for I rushed, but due to the time concern.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so we have completed the presentation and I can take the questions like through the chat box, or you can directly like turn on your microphones and ask your questions if you have any. Okay, do we have any questions for our lovely speakers? Cool, it seems nobody has any question and everybody has understood everything very well. Okay, speakers, do you have any questions for each other? Otherwise, I'm gonna finish the session slowly. Right then. Okay, thank you all for your presentations. They were really nice and I enjoyed all of them. Have a nice evening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Right. See you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.